We've made it. The NFL draft is officially here. And on today's show, we're going to tell you about 4 dynasty sleepers that you need to keep an eye on this weekend.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I admit it, I have a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on a classic game, Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. Kate, we've made it. The NFL draft is here. We've get picks tonight. But on today's show, we're going to be discussing some sleepers that probably won't be picked in round one. Maybe they will, probably not. That you need to keep an eye out for during the draft and in your dynasty leagues. And Kate, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Let's kick us off. I'm actually going to start with a prospect that we both love. And I just happened to get here in the show sheet planning first here because I think this probably would have been your very tippity top NFL draft sleeper. And that is USC receiver Tahj Washington, who I'm going to be honest, like generally speaking, an undersized wide receiver that people might not be overly excited about. He's 5'10", 174 pounds. But I will say, Marcus, we do have a recent, sort of prototype of teeny tiny wide receiver who was able to kind of overcome that size in Tank Dell here. Outproduced teammate Brendan Rice in 2023 to lead the team in receiving yards with Caleb Williams throwing the ball, despite the fact that he's got a much smaller frame. Started his career out at Memphis, played 2 seasons there, ended up having a really fantastic 2020 campaign, which unfortunately was cut short by the pandemic. 43 receptions, 743 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns as a redshirt freshman. Like, this dude was very much on track. Ended up transferring to USC for his final 3 seasons, but every single season you saw year over year improvement here from Tahj Washington. And generally speaking, I mean, he's got like the shortest arms ever. I think 29-inch arms in the 3rd percentile, small hands, just a small guy overall. But he's the type of player that when you're watching him, I think you kind of are able to forget for a minute that he's 5'10", 174 pounds.
Yeah, I loved his tape. Listen, I think he's the best USC receiver that we have in this draft. I think he's better than Brendan Rice, but he's not just a product of Caleb Williams. I want to make that clear. Like, yes, he had over 1,800 receiving yards over the last 2 seasons with Caleb Williams. But if you go back to that 2020 season, Kate, he was on an offense with Calvin Austin, who you know well from your Steelers, and he had over 800 total yards and 6 touchdowns on that offense as like the number 2 receiver. And they had a lot of other talent on that offense. So he's been producing for multiple years now. And I want to mention, if you look at some of his stable stats from PFF, I mean, they're off the charts. Like, he is 100th percentile in receiving grade over the last 2 years, number 1 in the country. His separation percentage is excellent. He beats single coverage. He beats zone coverage. He's just not very big. But I think he's going to go sometime early day 3 and be a massive value for whatever team selects him.
Yeah, even from a standpoint of looking at what he did at his pro day, ran a 4.52 40-yard dash, which isn't on its own overly impressive, especially when you consider the fact that he is a smaller wide receiver. But I think he plays with a little bit more quickness than you would guess based on that 40-yard dash time. And yeah, I think like all of these little things that he does right, which I think generally speaking, just really solid hands that you would never guess are 8.5 inches based on the types of catches he's capable of making. Tahj Washington is, I think, one of these players to watch that in the right system with the type of coach that can overlook that size and still utilize him effectively. Like from a pure skill standpoint, I think he's one of the top sleepers to watch in this draft.
I'm going to run through his stable metrics really quickly. 100th percentile receiving grade, mentioned that off the top. 98th percentile receiving grade against single coverage. 96th percentile separation percentage. 95th percentile separation percentage versus single coverage. 89th percentile yards per route run. 91st percentile in yards after the catch and per reception. 97th percentile drop rate. Like, everything he does, Kate, he does at an elite level. You're getting him late because he's small, but don't let that fool you. He's an absolute star. I want to mention another receiver who I like. I might not like him as much as Tahj Washington
Kind of
because
hard to get to that level
I
of
know,
infatuation.
I know. I do want to mention Javon Baker from UCF, who is really interesting. He was somebody who was at Alabama in 2020 and 2021, really didn't get on the field, had 116 total yards during those 2 seasons. He transferred in 2022 to UCF, had a fine season, 800 yards, 5 touchdowns. But this year, he really broke out. 1,100 yards, 7 touchdowns, averaged 22 yards per catch. Now he's 6'1", he's 207 pounds. He ran a 4.54 40-yard dash, but man, he's good at the catch point. He makes plays down the field. I think he's going to go late 3rd, early 4th round. There's just a lot of traits here. If there's going to be one receiver that, gets picked after, let's say, the top 80 that ends up becoming like a team starting X receiver, I think it could be Javon Baker. My comp for him in the NFL is Rashee Rice, who actually played in the slot in Kansas City. I won't be surprised if Javon Baker does the same thing.
Yeah, Javon Baker, you're going to like him because he has more of that size. He's definitely got a little bit of more on the bones in comparison to a Tahj Washington at 6'1", 202 pounds. And yeah, you love to see that year-over-year growth that he displayed there. Any concerns that he wasn't able to get on the field at Alabama? Because that's kind of my tipping point. You saw
A
the
little bit.
progression in his time at UCF, but he couldn't get on the field at Alabama. And that's kind of the question mark. Like, it's more understandable that he would break out at a UCF, but why didn't he find the field in 2 seasons at Alabama?
I mean, part of it is just the other talent that they had at Alabama. I think part of it is he didn't necessarily mesh well with the coaching staff and he needed a change of scenery. I'll admit that's a concern of mine. Like I am a little bit nervous that maybe he's just a product of playing against some lower competition, but it's not like he's somebody who was, a no name coming out of high school. This is a 4-star recruit who was the number 34 receiver in his class in 2020. So like he's a highly regarded prospect. It didn't happen for him at Alabama, and that's okay. Like this happens. It didn't happen for Adonai Mitchell at Georgia. He transfers to Texas. All of a sudden breaks out, probably going to be a 1st-round pick. So this happens every now and then. All right, let's talk about a tight end from Kansas State who I absolutely love and I think could potentially be the next Sam LaPorta. We will discuss that next. This episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've been told that I'm a competitive person. And I know I am. I have a competitive side and it absolutely loves Monopoly Go. And I'm sure you've heard of it before. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist at Monopoly where you play on not just one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is, I love messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like in classic Monopoly. But now I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. We've got baseball in full swing. We've got a bunch of golf tournaments coming up for the rest of the summer. And FanDuel is your place to bet on every single game. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all in an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. We'll be watching the draft tonight, but I've got two other TVs that are going to be dedicated to the NBA playoffs and the NHL playoffs. It's going to be just a fantastic night of sports. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and make your first bet an automatic win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Kate, we're getting more into our sleepers. We had Tahj Washington at the top. We had Javon Baker, another receiver that I really liked. Now I want to tell you about a tight end. And Kate, you remember our conversations about Sam LaPorta last year. Like whenever I talked about Sam LaPorta, I mean, I'm doing it right now. Like little tears would come in my eyes. Like I would well up because he was such a fun prospect. And I'm so glad that to see him having success in the NFL. I kind of feel the same about Ben Sinnott from Kansas
You're
State.
moving on quickly, Marcus. You're moving on very
Listen,
quickly.
Sam LaPorta will always be my boo. You don't need to worry about that. But Ben Sinnott, listen, I got a space in my heart for him as well. 6'0", so just under 6'4", 250 pounds, ran a 4.68 with it. Get this, Kate, a 40-inch vertical at 250 pounds with a 10.6 broad jump. He is an incredible athlete. He's a two-time first-team All-Big 12 selection, over 1,000 receiving yards in the last 2 seasons, 10 total touchdowns. I'm not sure if he's a fullback. I'm not sure if he's a tight end, but he's a darn good football player, and he's my number 2 tight end in this class.
Yeah, I think very, very fair to bet on the outstanding athlete at the tight end position who has good size and has shown ability to do it at that level. Now, I mean, I'm going to say, especially after that rookie season, a comparison to Sam LaPorta feels pretty darn lofty. So where would Ben Sinnott fall in your overall dynasty rankings if he landed in a situation that you could see him having a decent role early on in his career as a receiver as opposed to just a blocker?
How high would I have him overall in my tight end rankings?
Yes.
I mean, there's a couple landing spots where I wouldn't blink about putting him inside my top 16 right away. Like right away. And I can tell you, like, I know we mention this team all the time, but the Cincinnati Bengals have done a lot of work on Ben Sinnott. And to me, that's like a perfect fit in that offense. I'll give you another. The Miami Dolphins have done a lot of work on Ben Sinnott. And I think that's another really interesting one, considering they really haven't had a tight end, but he can play in the backfield like a Kyle Juszczyk, which Mike McDaniel had in San Francisco. He can also play in line. I think he's going to be one of these guys that, because he can block so well, he's going to get on the field early, and that's just going to give him plenty of opportunities to catch passes, to run the ball, which we should mention, like he can actually run the ball in short yardage, which makes him a really intriguing fantasy option. I love Ben Sinnott. If you're watching with us on YouTube right now, you can see some of the stable metrics via PFF. 76th percentile receiving grade, 89th percentile separation percentage, 76th percentile yards per route run, 80th percentile contested catch percentage, 57th percentile yards after catch per reception. Now, none of those numbers are like going to blow you away, but everything is above average. And then when you factor in his elite athleticism, he has all the makings to be tight end 2 in this class.
Can I tell you one of my favorite landing spots for
Sure.
Ben Sinnott? You might hate it, you might love it, but I think the 49ers are a perfect
Sure.
landing spot as you have an aging George Kittle who I mean, we know they're going to have some big financial decisions on the line here very soon. And George Kittle could very well be a factor, I think, in those decisions. Now, is Benson not going to come into this offense and be the day one, player that we're going to see from George Kittle? No. But I think the type of versatility that Sinnott shows in his game is something that Kyle Shanahan might be pretty intrigued about. And we know that this offense is overall just it's a friendly one to whoever is in it because there are so many weapons because the scheme is able to open things up for all of these talented receivers. Like that could be a place where, maybe he doesn't make an immediate punch in year one, but could be a key or a great fit years 2 through 4 on his rookie
Absolutely.
deal.
All right. Who else do you have for us for sleepers?
All right, I'm going to give you a name. This is an FCS name, so I want you to take
Oh,
it with
I
a grain
love
of
it.
salt. But I want to talk about South Dakota State running back Isaiah Davis, who, when you look at the metrics, Marcus, and again, you have to take them with a grain of salt because he was playing within the FCS. But when you look at the production that we saw out of this kid, he did exactly what you would want him to do in the FCS. He absolutely dominated and beat up all of the competition. Like that's what I want you to do. If you're going to come in and you're going to play in a less competitive era, I want you to really, really dominate. He's got
I want
good
you to walk
size,
on
six
water.
foot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like 6 foot, 218 pounds. Posted, just under 1,600 rushing yards this past season, 18 touchdowns, 50 career touchdowns over his 4 seasons at South Dakota State. And I want you to listen to these ranks. And this is between FCS and FBS running backs combined over the last 2 seasons with a minimum of 100 carries. We saw Isaiah Davis lead the NCAA with a 97.8 PFF rushing grade, ranked second in the NCAA with just over 3,000 rushing yards over the past 2 seasons, 33 rushing touchdowns, a 31% missed forced tackle rate, averaged 3.9 yards per carry after attempt or per attempt, yards after contact per attempt, 6.2 yards per carry. And let me give you these stats when he's seeing stacked boxes, because I think that this is kind of the one thing that I'm looking at. He's not like a top end athlete, but the one thing that is encouraging when I look at his game, saw 110 stacked boxes last season. That was the 5th most in the NCAA. And on those carries, he posted 710 rushing yards and 16 touchdowns, including a 34% missed forced tackle rate. Like, I generally think that, you have to take that production with a grain of salt, but I would not be surprised if a team is a bit enamored by the kid and wants to see what he can do at the next level and isn't going to necessarily take that lack of competition, hold it against him long term.
I think this is a great call. I saw him at the East West Shrine game, and he was clearly the best running back there. And he's also got some size, and this is what you don't typically see from some of these lower level schools. I mean, being 220 pounds, and I know the speed's not amazing, but it's a 4.57. We see plenty of running backs in the NFL today running the mid 4.5s. Not
That's
many are, yeah,
that's
not many
doable.
that. It's fine. It's fine. Um, I also like that South Dakota State has actually produced several NFL players, including Tucker Kraft, who went in the 2nd round last year. Dallas Goedert went to South Dakota State. We're going to have a guard this year, Mason McCormick, who went to South Dakota State. So this isn't a school that just isn't used to producing NFL talent. Like, they can absolutely do that. The Jackrabbits can do that a little bit. So I think he's going to get drafted. I think he's somebody who's going to play as a rookie because he is a really tough inside runner. He can play on special teams. I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about him in like year 3 as a starting running back for a team. And maybe it's not overly exciting. Maybe it's like on the Zamir White, Alexander Madison level tier of running back. But when you're talking about the 6th or 7th round pick, sign me up.
Yeah, give me that kind of value all day. Also, a capable receiver, a capable blocker. Like, I think a pretty well-rounded skill set for the kind of class that we have right here. Like, this isn't a class where we have a ton of, complete prospects. Obviously, Davis doesn't necessarily fit that bill because he's not, necessarily competing in the FBS, but like if you're comparing him among FCS running backs, he is the complete package. And I think
Love
that,
it.
yeah, give him a shot. I want to stash him in Dynasty all day.
All right, let's discuss, Kate, 4 veterans that could potentially be traded during the NFL draft or shortly after the NFL draft this weekend. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find as many quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and free. LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals that you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In any given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in all of the wrong places. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats right now, it might not have the time or the resources to hire. That's why LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make this process even faster and easier and quicker. They've even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even better. Go post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are just mere hours away from the 2024 NFL Draft starting. So before we get Commissioner Roger Goodell up there, we're going to run very quickly through 4 veterans, Kate, that we believe could be traded this weekend. Who do you get first?
Can I do a twofer, Marcus?
Sure.
So I'm going
Love
to
it.
just package these wide receivers because I think there's a very real possibility with the fact that we are seeing some landmark deals. Let's talk about the new highest paid wide receiver in the NFL. Congratulations, Amon-Ra St. Brown. These dudes are resetting the market. And I don't think that T. Higgins, Bengals wide receiver, or the 49ers, Brandon Ayuk, I just cannot imagine looking at the contracts that we've seen in the past week that they're going to get a deal done. Now, obviously, we might be waiting a little bit. I think it's going to happen day one. But for instance, the Pittsburgh Steelers, my favorite team, just restructured Alex Highsmith's contract to clear $7 million in cap space. A little bit suspicious here for the 2024 season. What do we need that cap space for? I don't know. I hope it's Brandon Ayuk, but generally speaking, I'm looking at these 2 wide receivers and I'm just seeing the contracts that are now becoming commonplace for the top talent in the NFL. I can't imagine a deal gets done, and this is going to be the time to do it and move on and get some immediate bang for your buck. Tell me I'm crazy.
I think the odds of Brandon Ayuk getting traded went up on Wednesday after the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal went down
Yeah.
because I can't imagine the 49ers trying to pay that price. I'm
They
not
broke the
really
market.
and I'm not really sources guy, and I've never been sources guy, but I think the 49ers, wink, wink, have been trying to trade Deebo Samuel this offseason to clear some cap space so they could keep Brandon Ayuk, but I don't think there's been many teams out there that are willing to trade for Deebo and take on his deal. So it does feel like Ayuk could potentially get traded. I'm more confident that Ayuk could get traded than T. Higgins. I think the Bengals are just going to hold on to T. Higgins and just let it ride and figure it out next offseason. I won't be surprised if the 49ers are a little bit more proactive here.
I think that's fair. The T. Higgins thing, I was kind of content that we were going to stand pat. The news dropped on Wednesday evening that there was a trade request. Obviously, there's been a contract dispute. T. Higgins then came out to say he expects to play. Then he comes out and says, like, well, we haven't even talked about a deal. I want out. So there's got to be something that gives. I don't necessarily know that they're going to be able to come to a conclusion here, but I also don't think T. Higgins is a guy that's going to like hold out this season. So
I've got one for you, but it's not overly exciting. I think Treylon Burks can be traded this weekend. He was drafted by a different regime. I don't really think he fits into Brian Callahan's offense. And I also think that they could trade Treylon Burks to potentially open up a spot for a Malik Neighbors or a Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm not as convinced that the Titans are drafting an offensive lineman at 7. Brian Callahan, it comes from the Bengals, who drafted, as you remember, Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell. He also came from the Denver Broncos, who, when they had Peyton Manning, it was Demaryius Thomas, Wes Welker, and Emmanuel Sanders, and the offensive line was They prioritized having these 3 elite receivers because it just puts so much stress on the defense. DeAndre Hopkins, still a good receiver, but his contract is up at the end of next year. They just signed Calvin Ridley. If you can bring in a Malik Neighbors or a Marvin Harrison Jr., I think that makes Treylon Burks expendable. And I do think there would be teams out there, like maybe the Eagles or the Cowboys, that would be interested in Treylon Burks. So that's my bold prediction is I think Burks gets traded this weekend.
And I honestly think from a dynasty perspective, that's probably the best thing for the Treylon Burks managers, right? I think what you need for Treylon Burks is hopefully a fresh start. And I think, and I've been pounding the table for it, he needs to return to the slot. He is not an ex receiver. I don't care how big he is. Get him back into the slot where he was so productive coming out of college and like let the man cook. I genuinely believe that like if they can find an offensive fit, even the Steelers are kind of an interesting option as a team that could use some size, especially in the slot with like Calvin Austin being an option. I think there are a lot of landing spots where he could come in and play an immediate role out of the slot. And suddenly, he might not be the top 20 dynasty wide receiver you drafted, but suddenly you might be considering him as a viable flex play on a week to week basis instead of burying him in the trenches of your dynasty roster.
I'm so fired up for the NFL draft. I can't wait. It's going to be a long day just counting down the seconds until we get that first pick. Everybody enjoy the NFL draft. Make sure you come back on Friday. Kate and I are going to be talking about some of the biggest storylines from round 1 of the NFL draft. We'll be talking about some dynasty implications. Of course, this is Locked On Dynasty, which you can check out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Go follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Modjuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy the draft. We will see you right back here tomorrow.